Attackers are only getting more proficient, so how can you proactively adapt your cybersecurity strategy? Core Security by Help Systems helps you uncover and prioritize the risks that pose the biggest threat to your organization. Core Impact is a penetration testing tool that safely finds and exploits vulnerabilities using the same techniques as attackers. You can conduct advanced pen tests with ease using certified exploits and automations. Take your engagements to the next level by pairing with Cobalt Strike, a threat emulation tool ideal for adversary simulations and red team operations. Learn more at securityweekly.com/core security. Hey everyone, this is Paul Asadorian with Security Weekly. I'm super excited to tell you about our latest partnership with Intel. Intel's vPro platform, you might have heard of it before, as it's been around for 15 years. IT and security teams have so many challenges, including trying to keep your computers up to date with patches, making sure all the hardware and software is working for your remote employees, and of course, keeping things secure as possible. Intel's vPro platform is designed to do just that, make it easier to keep your fleet of computers well-maintained, and as we all know, a well-maintained network is absolutely a more secure network. Join us for an interview with Yasir Rashid, Global Director of Enterprise Client Sales at Intel on May 12th, as we explore the features and solutions provided by the Intel vPro platform. Visit securityweekly.com/Intel for more information.
Welcome back to Enterprise Security Weekly. Do you have a specific guest or topic that you want us to cover in one of the shows? Submit your suggestions for guests by visiting securityweekly.com/guests and completing the form. We review suggestions monthly and we'll reach out to you once reviewed. All right, and for our next interview today, this one is sponsored by Xtero. Justin Tolman joins us today to talk about forensic challenges for security professionals. And actually, in preparing for this interview, I hadn't realized that Access Data was acquired by Xtero. So that was good news for me to understand who Xtero was and what they do. And we'll talk about that a bit. Justin is Xtero's forensic evangelist, a subject matter expert who has spent many years training customers and producing training content. And before joining Access Data, which then, as I said, was acquired by Xtero, Justin was a computer forensic specialist for Ohio's Bureau of Criminal Investigations. He also has a master's degree in cyber forensics from Purdue. Very cool. Welcome to the show, Justin.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so you joined before the acquisition. I know, for those that don't know DFIR, Access Data was like one of the two big ones. Like if you did a lot of data forensics work, there was really just like one of two platforms, maybe three with X-ways that you might use to handle your cases, to do investigations and stuff like that. Do I have that about right, or did that change at some point?
That's correct. Access Data had been around for a very long time, late 90s actually, and late 2020, Xtero acquired Access Data, and like you said, I'd been with Access Data for a couple of years at that point. I think I'm working on almost to year 7 now with Xtero Access Data since that acquisition. But you're right, FTK has been around for a very long time, and that was Access Data's product, and now we're Xtero.
Yeah, so before we dive a bit deeper into that and what we're going to talk about today, a little bit curious, since you come from the kind of the state federal space there, what got you into doing DFIR work in the first place?
So that's a funny question, actually. So in my undergrad, I was majoring in computer information technology. And no offense to any IT professionals out there, but I got to the end of my degree and I was like, I don't want to do IT. I'm in the wrong degree. And so I began applying for my local police department here in Washington State, getting ready to do that because I was working for campus police at the time. I loved the people I was working with, loved what I was doing. And then one of my professors was like, hey, hold up. You can do both. Go get this degree in cyber forensics from Purdue and basically be a computer cop. And went to Purdue, started interning with the Lafayette, Indiana Police Department there, fell in love with the field, and then got hired by BCI there in Ohio and just loved it ever since. So that's kind of how I got into it. And the funny thing about it, if we have any former DFIR law enforcement people, had I graduated with my CITA degree, which I would have, and then gone to work for a police department, I probably would have ended up still doing cyber investigations there, because that's how a lot of that falls together in the law enforcement industry even today. Is the guy who can work with computers becomes the cyber guy. So kind of must have been aligned in the stars or something, but here we are today.
Yeah, it was interesting. Actually, my first real career job, I went to work for a large credit card processor, and we didn't have an IR team. We didn't have anybody with that skill set. And to be honest, I didn't have that skill set either. I think I was maybe 21, 22 years old. And when we had an incident, it just came naturally to me to start the investigation, run the investigation. So they just let me run with it. And that was, I was on the IT side, and that was 4 or 5 years before I actually made the official switch over to the security side, and got the official chief incident handler title and all that stuff. So it's kind of funny how that kind of thing falls in your lap. I mean, just running investigations in general, I think is kind of a different skill set that doesn't work for all people.
Right. And I think your point there about even within the private industry, it's like, oh, this person is just going to kind of do it and build it while we fly it, is kind of a lot of how we're getting to where we're getting now, which is maybe a little segue, but like in the recent presidential mandate that President Biden put out here in the United States, he talks about, we don't have time to wait. It's got to happen now. Because I think a lot of companies have taken that mentality as like, well, we'll build it as we go. We'll get it done as we go. We'll find, but now they're saying, no, it's got to be a priority. You've got to have dedicated people. And of course that's been happening, but we're really starting to focus on that now.
And I think my saving grace was going to doing SANS 504. I convinced my employer to send me off to SANS 504, and that really taught me how to break everything down logically, the whole process, how to put together an incident response plan. I don't recall it going into any actual forensic stuff specifically, but definitely helped me on the incident response side of things. And then later on, I went to a CCE boot camp, and that was really kind of helpful, though that was the only time I used they specifically used X-Ways in that class. And I think I only used it for because you end up helping friends and family out too, right? Like recovering data from deleted data from systems and phones and stuff like that. And Absolutely. And I actually I got a key to X-Ways, from taking that boot camp. So I used it, more on the side to help people out than anything else.
It's kind of interesting how in the past, I don't know, we'll call it 20, 30 years, these fields have been growing with major tech changes. So I think in incident response, you were probably using more forensics than you thought, but we were so compartmentalized and have been because it's forensics is changing because there's new computers, there's new types of computers, mobile phones are out, the iPhone 2007, right? And so we're all trying to deal with our own things. And so I think in incident response, you're going to preserve that data. You call it preservation, and that's cool. Forensics is the art or the science as well of preserving data. But now I think we're hopefully starting to meld our terminologies and meld our workflows so that we realize, oh, wait, I don't have to do this. Forensics has already done it. Let's just take that. Oh, wait, I don't have to do this. IR has already done that. Let's meld these together. And we just haven't had time. I think I'll probably get crucified for this, but I think technology right now has kind of leveled out in the last few years. We're getting new stuff all the time, and it's speeding up, but a firewall still does what a firewall does. Mobile phones now are better than they were in 2007, but it's just more of the same. So now we've had this, in a way, this breathing room where we can now focus on getting better in our security, right? Instead of what's the new big disruption in the market other than the guys that are breaking into our networks, this type of disruption. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think we have a lot of building blocks here. Like if you look at a lot of, like the Oculus Quest, like if you ever, for whatever reason, needed to acquire an image from that, it's basically an Android phone, and you're going to, the same techniques that work there are going to work for that. Raspberry Pis, like a lot of the Arduino and ARM-based stuff out there, it's all just kind of building on top of itself. So if you know how to deal with one, generally how to deal with the other, especially with IoT devices and stuff like that. I don't know how much you've ever had to tackle that kind of stuff. I mean, there's this whole niche market that exists just around acquiring data from different products. From cell phones, you got your whole kit that comes in with 800 different tips for different flip phones, and then acquiring Android and iOS stuff is almost more of an art than a science, it seems like.
Yeah, there's a lot of that, and it's, but like you said, it builds on it. So we would get that in all the time, like, hey, I've got an Xbox or I've got this or that, and more than the trick is really, do we have a connector to plug into it? That's a big one. And then what file system? And, and you start looking at things like, oh, it's just an ext file system. Oh, it's just NTFS file system, or it's FAT or whatever. Yeah, it's a different device, but like a Raspberry Pi is on, I think, ext or something. So it's like, well, as long as I can get a hold of the SD card or the internal memory, we can probably look at it. But but what that's afforded us a little bit, and maybe it's made us complacent at the same time, who knows, but is we should be able to focus on the different things of getting better and securing our networks and, hopefully protecting ourselves a little bit more in these times. So.
Yeah, so since we're on the topic, we're a bit ahead of, there's some other things I wanted to talk about also, but on the point of acquiring images, of getting that data in the first place, I imagine I never had to deal with cloud, when I was doing that kind of stuff, but I imagine that was a change also, not so much in, like, it's not hard to get data out of the cloud, but certainly, I think the existing tooling didn't really, maybe wasn't prepared for it, or is it more complicated or more simple than I'm making it? Am I making it more complicated?
No, I think, to the programming, I don't know how hard it is programming it to do it, but the key thing with forensics, when we talked about moving to the cloud, you have two different sides of it. And I think the audience here is mostly enterprise. So with enterprise, you're controlling your own cloud environment. You have those credentials. It is your company data. So you don't really have to worry too much about privacy considerations like a law enforcement side would. And with enterprise, the trick there was not so much getting to the data. Your IT departments typically could get to the data or copy it out. It's doing it in a defensible way. And that's where like forensic tools like FTK or whatever have focused on, is we are able to connect to these cloud repositories and defensively extract that data, store them in a secure container so that they can be stored for a long time. But more importantly, so that we know, hey, this stuff hasn't changed. This is what was on the cloud at that time, which is super important because, a business is going to keep running, not just because an investigation starts on an individual or a department or even a company. A lot of times that business is going to keep rolling. So it's important to keep the data integrity at the time we collect it. And that's where forensics comes in swinging.
Yeah, and I think for folks that aren't super familiar with this kind of stuff, I think what you're alluding to is that when you do DFIR, you have to treat everything as if it's going to go to court, because you don't know what's going to go and what's not. So you have to worry about chain of custody and the integrity of the data that you're preserving, and the copy you do the investigation on is not the copy that gets sealed and goes into in as evidence, all that stuff, right?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting thing, and it deals with definitions. So if we actually look at the term forensics and simplify it down, the term forensics is the application of science for the purposes of court to a specific field, right? So in this case, we're talking digital forensics, DF in the DFIR, digital forensics. And so, like you said, the standard of the way you approach it is, if you are going to court, you're going to present this to a judge or a jury or something like that. And that is the highest level of defensibility that you're going for. And so, yeah, exactly. Now, even if you're not going to go there, you're saying, like you said, maybe we will, we don't know. But at the same time, if we do it forensically sound, and was what we would say, we're prepared either way. And it also gives you a level of robustness, of course, because those forensic containers are secure files and they can sit around for a while and nothing's going to change. And you can verify very easily that nothing has changed. So that's nice. But you're right, absolutely, for court. And it's in the definition of the word forensics.
Yeah. Yeah, so let's change gears and switch over to talking about the industry itself. You're talking about how things are kind of smoothing out. Maybe DFIR is well defined, and we can maybe switch focus a little bit. But certainly, I think DFIR has been one of those areas. I've seen maybe 3 areas that really, and a lot of it goes to higher education, what they have degrees out there for, but entry into the field of security. And, certainly DFIR is, I think, more specialized, than the other 2, but generally I see, offensive security, so pen testing, which boggles my mind, is like, that should never be an entry level field, in my opinion. SOC analyst, and then digital forensics. In fact, I remember the first person I ever hired with a cybersecurity related degree. It was a computer forensics degree, an associate's degree, and basically the whole program was based on FTK. But what I didn't know anything about the degree program, and what I kind of learned the hard way after hiring this guy is that they really, this particular degree program leaned super heavy on the tool, like taught him how to use a tool, but this guy showed up, had no clue how to run an investigation. So you could hand him a disk image and he could load it into FTK, but then he needed somebody to kind of tell him what running an investigation is like, what the stages are like, how to get pointed in the right direction. So curious as to your, obviously this probably wasn't the best degree program. This was in 2006, 2005. So very, very early, for a cybersecurity degree program. So hopefully, you tell me, you're probably more familiar with this stuff than I am, I'll just let you answer.
So I've seen the exact same thing working with people that companies I've worked with have hired when we're doing investigations. So exactly. I think this is caused by a couple things. First off, we have college professors that really give it their all, honestly. Like I don't mean to disparage them, but maybe they're not former investigators themselves. So they're teaching the tool, they're teaching the material that they have, and giving them this tool foundation. Okay, cool. But like you said, they're going to come out and they're going to be like, listen, I know the buttons. I know what buttons, but I don't know what order to push them in to be effective. I think it comes down to us that are already in the industry to really embrace internships or apprenticeships or any ships that can give these people hands-on. So I mentioned that while I was at Purdue taking courses, that was an FTK based learning there in the classroom. But what really gave me, like, where I learned everything basically was interning with the Lafayette, Indiana Police Department. Went in, sat pretty much like a couple days a week with their CSI detective, how do you do cases? What's next? What are you looking for? What's not important? Like what's the flow? Those types of things. And honestly, like the stuff that I learned in the classroom, I'm not disparaging Purdue either. It was great. It was good. But everything I learned that really took me to a high place as an investigator was hands-on. And I got that boost. So when I landed at BCI, I landed running. I mean, you really learned it when it's you on the line. You're not an intern, but at least I had an idea of the flow. And I think we're hesitant in the DFIR security industry because of what we deal with 100%, security issues and personal information and all that sort of stuff on the enterprise side. And then, of course, the law enforcement side has its whole, contraband issues with what they look at. But it is, if you want quality new employees, it'll put them light years ahead. And we kind of need that more than ever. I just saw an article that the security industry, incident response, DFIR is short 600,000 workers or needed people in the United States alone. That's a lot of people. And even if nobody wants to hire them all out of college, that's a big run up.
Yeah, and I've got mentees that I've worked with. At the same time, people are saying like we've got this huge gap, that all these jobs to be filled. I've got mentees telling me, hey, we've got the degree, we've got the certifications, and we can't get hired because everything we see says 3 to 5 years of experience. And they're coming to me saying, well, where do I get that first 1 to 3 or 1 to 5 years of experience if nobody's hiring for that? And I think that's part of the problem is, it's just a gap in the pipeline that needs to be filled. Somebody's got to be willing to do these internships to give these people, the opportunity that Lafayette police force there gave you.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's when I talk to students on a regular basis. It's just part of the thing, going around talking. And I know it's not for everybody, but if you're going into digital forensics, law enforcement, digital forensics analyst is a good place to start because you're going to get it from the fire hose. I worked, 75, 80 cases a year at minimum, and it's all sorts of different stuff. And unfortunately, they don't pay that great right out of the gate. But what that means is they're kind of forced to take us college grads and hire us. And so I was able to, with, coming out of college with only my internship year of experience, but still just say, hey, BCI, I'm your guy. And they were like, yep, you're our guy, and hired me and, got me in, and then was fortunate enough to prove my abilities and get on with Access Data and move through. Right. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Somebody's got to give them that chance. And we in the industry can't on one hand complain about a shortage, then on the other hand, say we're not going to hire all these people that want to be hired. So it's kind of.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's getting a lot of airtime. I'm hearing a lot of people saying the same things, like I'm not the first to say that. I think a lot of people in our field tend to be very mission focused, and as a result, tend to do a lot of mentoring. And we're all just running into the same things. We're hearing we know where the problem is. We just got to convince companies more companies to do internships. I know some companies are great about it. It tends to be part of a company's DNA, like kind of a first principle for them. Like they're a teaching company. Like everybody's learning. They're going to hire interns. They do lunch and learns. Even the experts in the company are learning from other experts in that same company. Like it just tends to be something that company does versus companies that tend to run a lot more lean, and they're never going to put out a job rec for anything less than 5 years experience.
It's interesting that you talk about like the lunch and learns and experts and company DNA. I think it's best, of course, when it's company DNA, but it is interesting that I think the experts are seeing the need for that, because the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA, actually is part of their playbook as preparation, literally mandates that. Like,
oh, really?
In company training, whatever that may be. It talks about all the different options, but part of that is, they don't use this term, but lunch and learns and experts teaching experts within the company and all that sort of stuff. They're trying to get these companies motivated to share their information. We can't hoard it within just a few people, because those people are getting shorter and shorter in supply.
Yeah. So shifting gears again, I think that's a great place to leave that conversation. But shifting gears again, CISA says it, so you have to do it. That's where we're leaving that.
Yeah.
What is kind of the cutting edge with DFIR here? I see in the show notes you're talking about using automation, functioning in zero trust environments, using DFIR for detecting insider threats and things like that, which honestly, in my experience, I don't really have any malicious actor stories from my DFIR, from my chief incident handler background. Like, it's all insider stuff.
Yeah. Insider's the big one. And I think that's why over the last, 10 years or something, zero trust has gained more and more momentum, is we can't trust our perimeter anymore because they're already in the gates, I guess, But yeah, I think what the future is of DFIR is automation. And I don't think that's because we don't need people anymore. We're always going to need high-level DFIR professionals, high-level security professionals. But we talked about that shortage of people, 600,000 people in the US alone. And then the other thing is cost savings. Automation works when you aren't. And also, I've been doing forensics for quite a while now. A lot of forensics is really, for the lack of a better term, mundane. Collection, creating an image. It's, traditionally it's taking a hard drive, plugging it into a computer and walking away as it just copies itself. In the enterprise world, we have like agents that we install within either gold images or on the machines later that acquire data. And again, we're going to just kick it off and tell it to do its thing. And then we'll just go off and wait till it's done. But that monitoring, that kicking off the job, that interfacing with, say, our border security software, all that sort of stuff, that takes up valuable time where, like, say, my time is better used in analysis. That's where you need the person, right? So we can automate the mundane, is what I like to say. So security alert goes off, something is triggered in whatever system you're using. It kicks off and says, hey, this computer or this node or this department we've detected a breach or suspect traffic, and automation will kick off, start to collect those machines automatically, and then even kick off processing and notify the appropriate agents. Whether it's 2 a.m., 2 p.m., or during a lunch break, it doesn't matter, because we know that one of the biggest enemies in a breach is time, right? So we want to speed that up, that response time.
Absolutely. Yeah. The attackers are automating stuff, but we're going to have to as well.
Absolutely.
Very good. One last gear switch before we wrap here, a bit of a more personal topic. I saw that you play Apex Legends, and love the fact that game introduced a nonverbal communication system. I think that's probably one of the most innovative things I've seen in a video game in a long time. Like, it's the idea that people that don't speak the same language, complete strangers, can just jump onto this thing, communicate, and if we want to tie it back to security, it's very much one of those look at gaming, like figuring out how to improve communication.
No, absolutely.
We can use that in so many other industries.
It's so funny you say that, because gaming can teach you so much about, you can take things out of the gaming industry and the way that games are approached and apply it in so many different ways. But absolutely, this nonverbal triggering, cross communication is going to be big in incident response. Both the presidential mandate and CISA is saying, hey, we've got to improve that communication. And, you know, if they're saying it, like you said earlier, we got to do it. And it's interesting you mentioned that the bad actors are using automation. We also need to make sure that we are teaming up, because they're not working alone. They're communicating. They're on message boards, sharing information, how to breach this, that weakness. But yet we get breached and we don't share that with anybody. We're like, oh, we got to keep this in. We don't share how we fixed it. And so we really need to start communicating, teaming up. We need to be pre-mades over here on the good side, right? So that, you know, what high tide lifts all ships together or whatever. But absolutely, we need to start communicating, teaming, and working together to prevent these breaches from happening.
Yeah, speaking my language. It's actually one of my side projects is doing postmortems on breaches, and there's so few cases, you know, unless there was like a House or Senate subcommittee, you know, that put together an investigation, or a class action lawsuit resulted in the mandate report becoming public or something like that. Generally, like we get enough to have a vague idea of what happened, you know, but the stuff you miss are the people and the process stuff. Like I found in my investigations, you know, people had all the tools they needed, you know, but they didn't work as a team. You know, they didn't have any practice. Like, it was clear this was the first time they were running through a live fire like having an actual adversary in their network, you know, and just were not, you know, made mistakes, made some very basic mistakes, and would have benefited from more practice and more, you know, working together on maybe simulations or something like that. And certainly understanding those details, you know, like that's come up in a few of the cases I've done, but that's such a small sample and it's so anecdotal. You know, I suspect it's probably like that in the majority of them, but we don't know because those details never become public.
That's right. And I think there's a way to share it without, you know, you don't want to give up your corporate secrets, because then whatever, but there's a way to share. Hey, this is what happened. These are the vectors. Make sure you don't get hit as well.
I don't need to know who you are to, you know, take lessons from how you failed. It doesn't matter at all. You know, maybe the industry, like the vertical or something like that, is relevant, but absolutely, like it's a win-win if we can just convince people to do it.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Justin, thanks so much for joining us on Enterprise Security Weekly today. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Thanks for having me.
All right, make sure you visit securityweekly.com/Extero to learn more, and we'll be right back in a few moments with the weekly Enterprise News.